Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy, brought to you by KETIV Technologies. I am Nigel Mbayek, the voice in the sky, or your headphones today, I guess. And today I'm joined by one of my good friends here, Jose Paredes Clara. So Jose here on our team is one of our application engineers. Jose works mainly in the data management side of things. So when you're thinking about Vault, when you're thinking about things like Fusion Lifecycle, Jose is probably the go-to person for a lot of that. So today, Jose is going to be going over something that I think is a pretty crucial part of your day-to-day life here at KETIV, which is setting up Vault server maintenance plans. This is something Jose does for, I would say, 70 or 80 of our customers on a regular basis, as well as the rest of the team when Jose is unable to do it because of other tasks as well. But it's really important, right? Your data is I think one of the two most important things for an engineering organization. One being the data, and two being the people who are actually creating that data. And you want to make sure that data is secure and safe, and you don't lose any of it, and it's easy to find in the future. And part of that is to have a vaulted environment, right, to maintain that data. But there are some things that you want to do to make sure that that vault environment stays working, I guess, for lack of a better word there.
Yeah. I think part of it is if you're working in a vaulted environment, it's because you want to keep your data safe. Typically, you want to make sure that it's not only stored on your computer, so that if your computer dies, it's still being saved in the vault. Well, the vault technically is still on a machine itself. So you want to make sure that if something happens to that machine, you have a fail-safe plan to go to, and you want to make sure that you have a backup of your backup at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. Moving, like, it's one thing to take backups; it's another thing to move them off the machine. And this seems like kind of common knowledge for probably there's a decent amount of IT folk in here right now. But there are ways to get a backup for Vault that are better than others, and we can highlight a couple of those today as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started here, Jose. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type those into the chat panels of your respective watching windows, and we'll go ahead and address those.
Yeah, no worries. All right. So again, we're going to go over how to set up a maintenance plan. Nigel touched on, Vault backups that you can have. We're also going to talk about SQL maintenance here, setting up a SQL maintenance plan, whether you're on SQL Express or SQL Standard. And then just some general steps on how to restore these, or what the process would look like if something did happen in your environment. So moving forward here, contingency plan. We talked about having a contingency plan. Your data, something you're saving it on the vault, it's on a server. You want to make sure that that data itself is still safe there. So, today we're going to go over how to set up a Vault backup script. Typically we use a batch file, which is a list of commands that Windows uses to basically do things in a program. And then how to set that batch file up in a task scheduler so that you don't have to manually run it every day or whenever you need it. You can kind of set it up and have it run in the background. And the next thing is, again, a SQL maintenance plan. You want to make sure that your databases are set up to work as smoothly as possible without you having to worry about them slowing down or causing delays there. And then again, the last part here is just restoring some of these backups. The Vault utility that we'll be using to get the backups, you can use it also to restore in this environment and what that might look like. So moving forward, Vault backups. Again, we typically use a batch file. We do have some customers who use PowerShell or some other forms of running these commands. Typically what we do when we jump on a customer's server to set up these maintenance plans, we use a batch file. Again, this is just a text file that has a list of commands that Windows runs with certain criteria there. And then, so what this batch file that we're going to work on today does is it's going to kill the ADMS. For those of you that have worked with Vault in the past, you'll know that if you have a session of Vault data management server open and you try to open up another one, it'll actually give you an error saying, hey, you can't have two of these open at the same time. So if you typically, if you have a ADMS open and you try to run a backup in the background, it'll fail. It'll show up in a log file, but basically for that night, your backup failed. So what we want to do is add a line in there that typically it kills the task or the process that is running for the ADMS, so that we eliminate that step there. The next part there, we're gonna make sure that we have two on hand. And what I mean by this is, again, if your backup fails one of the nights, you don't want to end up with no backups on your server there. So you want to make sure that you keep multiple backups on hand, just in case one does fail. You do have the one from the previous night still on hand. You might be thinking, why don't we just keep all of them on the drive, and just manually delete them. And that is an option. The only thing there is your disk space actually fills up pretty quickly if you're keeping all of your backups at the same time. And that might not be an option for some of our customers. We have customers who have vaults that are like over a terabyte as a whole. So if they, the backup basically, it duplicates the files there. So now your backup plus your vault is 2 terabytes. And you start using up a lot of space. Next thing it does is it actually runs the vault utility, which we'll look at. And then the last thing there for that batch file, it doesn't have to be in that specific batch file. It can be a separate task, but we recommend that you move it offsite. We want to make sure that we keep this backup somewhere else that is safe, not only in case the machine itself has failure, but we are all familiar with and some forms of cyber attacks, whether it be encryptions or anything that gets into our system. If the backup itself resides locally only, then they're going to go ahead and delete that or encrypt that as well, which defeats the purpose of it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up a file that outlines all of this. So again, this is just a sample backup. It's a full backup, but right now it has the extension of txt, which is just a text file. Again, it can start off as this. We talked about killing the ADMS. So the first thing you're going to do is set up a task kill, and you're going to tell it what you want it to shut down. So it's just the process of the ADMS console. Again, this is your Vault server. It's installed on the back end of your Vault. So you just want to tell it that it's going to close this down. If the nice thing here is if this process is not running, it'll just move forward. It'll tell you, hey, couldn't find this process, and it actually just moves forward in the script. So no issues there. Next thing we're gonna do, again, we talked about keeping multiple on hand, and that's what we call cascading the backups. So the way that this works here is you will have 2 folders. One, let's call them A and B. We want to make sure that we have 2 of them on hand. So B will always be your oldest backup that you have, and A will be your newest. And what this script does here is it deletes B, moves and then moves your now oldest backup down to B, and then A will run the new one. So here you'll see we'll do a remove directory, delete folder B, including the backup that's in it. We'll rename folder A to B. So now, again, we have one on hand. That way, when we make the new directory A, even if it fails, we'll still have a backup available to us. Again, typically we do it with 2 just for space limitations, but depending on the size of your vault, you can have up to, however many backups you want on hand. Once it's done cascading, we now have an empty folder in A. We tell it to run, again, here comes the connectivity.adms console.exe that we killed up here. Since we were running it again, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't already running. So now that we are sure that it's not running anymore, we go ahead and run the new one. We tell it the operation that we want to do. So that's that -O here. We want to make sure that it's running a backup. We tell it the location that we want it to run. So that's this -B. So again, we created a new folder. This folder A is the same one that we created up here. That's where we want our backup to run. Next two things here are the username and password that we'll be using to run the backup. If you're not familiar with the ADMS, or if you are, you'll know that you need administrator credentials to get onto the ADMS. And that doesn't mean it has to be this administrator account. It just has to be an account that has the administrator role assigned to them. So it can be, if you want to have a specific account that is run only for backups, then you can use that here. So VU, of course, stands for Vault User. VP stands for Vault Password. That is the, you know, if it's blank like it is on my Vault here, you don't have to type anything in. And then this switch over here, this VAL, what this does is it validates the file store afterwards. So it goes through its whole backup process, and at the very end, it makes sure, hey, do we have all the files that we think that we do? It goes through the folder and makes sure that it has everything that it needs. The thing about validations, though, depending on the size of your vault, it typically what it does is it doubles the time that it takes for the backup to run. So it'll go through its first initial backup process. Once it's done, it'll basically run through and double check to make sure everything's all right. So if you are, you know, setting this up and you notice that you know your backup started at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, but they're not finishing till like 8 p.m. on Wednesday, you know, and your tasks are running into each other and everything like that, then double check to see if you have a validation that could shorten the time. We still recommend you get one with a validation, but if you're running into issues like this, you can have a backup run on Friday where, you know, no one is using it on Saturday, so you can have a longer runtime for your backup. The next switch that I have here is DBSC. For those of you that are using standard content center libraries inside of Inventor, and they're being hosted on your vault, those are downloadable again.
Yeah, we don't need to back those up.
Exactly. So at this point, if you're backing them up, you're just taking up some space. It might save you some time. It'll automatically restore them. But you know, if you're short on space or anything like that, you can actually use this switch here to tell Vault, hey, don't back these up. They're standard. We can download it again. So just do it that way. This -S here, basically we're telling it to run silently. This tells the backup utility, hey, nobody's going to be able to press any buttons. So that means don't prompt me. Don't bring anything up that I won't be able to click on. A lot of our customers have actually asked me about this error. It comes up in a log file again, and it says, hey, there was an error. And a lot of times our customers see error and they're like, is my backup still good? After you read the error, it's like, hey, you ran this task in a way that it wasn't meant to. You can't press any buttons. That's, again, paraphrasing there. But the way to fix it is just to add this -S switch in here. And then the last one here, -L. Again, Vault itself has its location for log files. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's on your C drive, program data, Autodesk, Vault server, and then file store. And again, this is where all the logs are stored for the ADMS. But as you can tell right there, unless you know exactly where it is, you don't want to go ahead and navigate or look it up every time. An easy fix for that is actually tell Vault where your log file is, where you want it to be. So if you want it to be right next to the backups and keep track of it that way, just go ahead and create a text file. So let's say, again, let's go on my desktop. Let's say I want to go ahead and create a new text file. So I always call it vault log.txt. And then if you shift and right click, it gives you the option to copy as a path, which is a really neat trick. And then you just paste it after the -L. This means that whenever this backup runs, this batch file runs, it'll put the backup in that location. So once you save this, again, you want to make sure that you save it. So I'm going to cancel out here. I'm actually going to save as. The reason I'm going to do that is I want to save it as a BAT file. And this, again, will give us what we need to set up our backups here. There is a document that Autodesk has that explains all the switches and the format for the backup. So actually, we should be able to provide that in a follow-up just for you to have for your records. Running backups through the batch file isn't the only thing you can do. So if there's other things on there that interest you, just that document should help as well.
Reindex, defrag,
yeah,
all that fun stuff.
All these other tasks that you can run. Next, we're going to bring up the task scheduler. And again, this is a Windows tool that you can use. And you can see I have a task here set up. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I need some empty space here. Here. So I'm going to create a new task. Again, you're going to give it a name that you want. So if you're running Vault Professional, you know that there's two types of backups you can run: a full backup, which grabs everything on the server, or an incremental backup that only catches the difference between, when the last backup was run and today. So we're going to run a full backup. Here, you're going to choose the account that is going to be running this task. This part is important here because, again, you want somebody that has permissions on the server itself.
To open the ADMS.
Exactly. You want somebody typically that has administrative privileges on the server, on the machine. So, if that's not you or your IT has a specific account that they want you to use, this is where you would set that. You also want to make sure that it's that the task runs whether this user is logged on or not. That's just important because it doesn't require somebody to be logged on to the machine at all times. And then you want to go ahead and run it with highest privileges. Again, this is just to ensure that when the task is run, it doesn't run into any issues running the ADMS console or just writing to any of the folders.
Yeah, and odds are, like, if you're a VaultCare or I guess now Streamline customer of ours, odds are you already have this on your system because Jose's already put it there. So if you are a Streamline customer and you're trying to put this there and you see one that's already there, it's probably because we put it there.
And if you have questions and you're a Streamline customer, just reach out to us.
Just call Jose.
Exactly. The next thing we're going to set here is triggers. Basically, how often do you want this to run? So you're going to hit new, and typically we set it to run weekly, Monday through Friday, and then we tell it what time we want it to run. Depending on the time that your users leave the office, you typically want no one to be on it. So I'm going to set this to run at 7 p.m. And you'll see that it's enabled and it'll start running probably tonight. And then the last portion is the action, what you want this task to do. And because we did all the setup on the back end already, all we have to do is browse to our batch file.
When you created today.
Yeah,
it's on the top
right here. The batch file that you created, and just hit OK. And all it's going to do is run this list of commands and go through the process. Just hit OK right there. It'll ask you for your password. And again, because I gave it a name that I already had, it's like, hey, this one already exists, so let's give it a different name. And it creates it. One thing that's important in there, and you saw I had to type in my password. If the password for the account that you're using changes or expires,
this blows up.
Exactly. The task stops running. You'll see, actually, this right here, this error right here, the history is disabled, but my password changed since the last time that I set that account up. That means whenever it tries to run it, it's using the wrong password and it actually runs into issues. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of times when IT requires accounts to have passwords that expire every 3 months or something like that, including the ones on the server, we need to keep an eye on that and make sure that as soon as that password expires, somebody updates the task to make sure that that it's good to go.
Yeah. Also, too, yeah, just like part of it is, something a lot of times what we run into is people give Jose or myself access to a Vault server to do some work on it, whether it's an upgrade or something, and then we set all this up, and then when we leave, they disable the KETIV account.
Yeah.
That'll also cause this to fail. So make sure that the account is firing. Generally, what you want to do is you want to check this every once in a while and just make sure that the backups are of normal size, as to what you expect in the folder.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like Nigel was saying, if you're a Streamline customer, we'll do our quarterly checkups.
Yep, and we'll look at it for you.
Exactly. We take a look and it's like, oh, well, this backup stopped running like 27 days ago. And we'll ask, does this password change? Oh, actually it did. And then all we have to do is update it and they start running again.
Yep.
But, this helps. We do it quarterly, but if you can go in there monthly or, bi-weekly, anything like that, you'll be able to catch it a lot sooner than, when we jump on. That's it for batch files. If you have any questions, or Vault backups, if you have any questions there, feel free to reach out in the questions there. Next thing we're going to look at is SQL Server maintenance here. And what we're basically going to do here is just look at the initial setup here for the SQL maintenance. There are 2 ways to set it up depending on whether you have SQL Express or SQL Standard or Enterprise. Because of those 2 differences, they're pretty elaborate either way. We're going to send out again, an Autodesk article that explains how to set that up and how to work with that. But we're going to show the parts that are the same between both of them. Here we're going to log on. If you don't have access to the SQL database, and if you're a Streamline customer, reach out to us. If you're not, typically the password itself is standard as well. So just reach out to us. We'll confirm that it's standard. If not, if you have a SQL database manager, someone who has access to this, it'll probably be them who can set this up. But I'm gonna go ahead and log in here. And what you wanna do here is you wanna go to databases, system databases, and then this temp DB. Again, this isn't what we're setting up here as a maintenance plan, is to make sure that these databases are allowed to grow smoothly without any issues, causing slowdowns. So we're going to right click on temp DB. We're going to go to its properties. And what you want to do in here is you want to make sure that, again, you're giving it room to grow. You're setting this up. So you're going to go to files. And here you see I was actually already had it set up for my Vault in my SQL database here. But typically when you jump in here, what you'll see is this. So you're telling it, the initial size is 8 megabytes for the actual database and the log for it. Autodesk recommends that, again, through the article that we're going to send out, that we turn this up to 1024 here. Now, this is where, depending on the server that you're using, so depending on how many cores your server has, you'll want to go ahead and set up more of these. So the way you can figure out how many cores you have is actually by going to this PC. So if you hit the start menu, go to this PC, and then right click and hit properties, you will get to this screen here. Now, under processor, in here, you will actually, in the description of your server in here, you will know, or you'll be able to tell if you're running dual core or, a single core or anything like that, or 8 cores, depending on the type of machine that you're running. the reason you want to know that is you will, for every 2 cores that you have on your server, you will want to have an additional temp dev. So if you're running 4 cores, you will have temp dev and temp dev 2. If you're running 8 cores, you'll have temp dev through temp dev 4. Again, this is outlined in the article that we'll be sending out, but you want to make sure that you have one for each one of those, for every pair of cores that you have. Each one will be set to 1024. And then for every temp dev that you have, you'll add up all that, all the initial space that you have for each one, and then you'll add them all up and set that for your log. So this temp log here, if I had 2 of these, it would be 2048. If I had, you know, just the one here, I'm setting it to 1024. You want to go in here and as far as auto growth, for the temp log, you want to set it up to grow by 10% and be unlimited. So if you click on here, it'll give you the options for each line that you have there. So for the actual temp devs, you want to make sure that it's 100 megabytes and unlimited. For the log, you want to do it at 10% and unlimited. Again, this is just a plan to make sure that everything grows smoothly. Everything is moving along at a pace that you need. If you do notice, you know, if you're the system administrator, the vault administrator, and your users are complaining, hey, when I do a search, it's taking a while to actually come up, make sure you can double check to see if you have a plan, a maintenance plan in place for your SQL database, which is in charge of the queries inside of Vault. Again, once this is set up, this is just the bare bones portion of it. You want to make sure that this is set up in a way that you can set up a batch file. Again, this is going to end up being a batch file for SQL Express. But for SQL Standard, under, I believe, management here, you will actually have a SQL maintenance option if you're using SQL Standard. Again, because I'm on Express, which is the free version of SQL, I don't have that option. Now, the last thing we're going to look at here is, you know, we have our backups, we have our SQL maintenance, everything's running all right, but, you know, something happens. Somebody encrypted all of our files on there. We need to move to a new server, or something gets corrupted in our vault and we need to restore it to a previous point. What we're going to do at that point is either reinstall the Vault server on a new machine, or we're just going to go ahead and start replacing what we have on our current server. The way that we'll do this is we'll go to Tools, and you'll see here you have a backup and restore. If you're on Vault Basic, these two options will be separate. One will say backup, one will say restore, right on top of each other. For Vault Professional, these are both together. And then when you open this up, you have the option of what you want to do. In this case, we're going to go ahead and restore. We're going to do a full restore. The difference here is, you know, in Vault Professional, you can have Vault full restores or incremental restores, depending on at what point in your backup process you are. If it's a Thursday and your full backups run on Friday, then the most recent backup will be an incremental. You want to make sure that you tell it, hey, we're going to restore this full backup plus these deltas that we have. So again, it depends on the scenario that you're running into. But if we're doing a full restore, you just got to point it to the right location on your server, and make sure that you're telling it, you know, what am I restoring? At what point am I going back? And then what's nice about these restore options is it's the same way you would do it if you are moving to a new server. A lot of our customers, you know, if their Vault is currently on a server that doesn't support the version they're trying to go to, well, the way that you would move is you would get a backup of your Vault, move it to the new server, and then restore it. What's nice here, again, is you can tell it, you know, do I want to set it to my default location where, you know, that my databases currently are, or do I want to restore them to a specific location that might have more space? Maybe your D drive is bigger than your C drive. You want to put your databases there. Same thing for your file store. You can place them in the locations that you need them to without running into any issues there. But again, this is all assuming that you have your backups running, that you have them being copied off site somewhere in a secure location, just in case something does happen to the machine. Going back to the PowerPoint here, just going through again, just recap of the SQL maintenance. You want to set the database's growth in respect to the cores, the amount of cores that you have, and then the actual maintenance plan, depending on the SQL version that you have, you'll either have to set up through a batch file or through the actual SQL Server Management Studio. And then again, something to keep in mind is when you're restoring a backup, it overwrites whatever is there now. So if you are trying to merge two vaults and you get a backup of one and you're trying to merge it with the other one, it doesn't work that way. There is actually a tool specifically made for that by Autodesk. It's not very widely available. You'd have to ask them for it. But if you try to do it the way that I mentioned, all you're doing is overwriting what's currently there. So just keep that in mind. You know, if you restore an older backup, that's what's going to be your current vault at that point. So make sure that you know, the newer your backup, the better it is, and you'll overwrite completely whatever is currently there. I think total, that's all I have here for maintenance. What I do want to bring up here, though, is we have some events coming up here. So if you want to go ahead and come through to KETIV.com, you'll see that we actually have a page here for events. One of the big ones coming up, I think, is the hands-on test drive for Discovery Live from our ANSYS team. So that's actually pretty cool. They actually have machines set up here that you guys can work through some actually pretty neat data sets, and they're there to actually help you A, get a feel for the software, and B, actually you know, ask questions about it.
Yep, and on top of that too, if Jose wanted to jump to the support page too, if you jump to the support page, there's a description of all of the support packages from KETIV. If you have any questions, our phone number is really easily reachable there, and then all of the descriptions of what we offer are also here as well. So if you know, you want to pass over the vault information and the vault responsibility over to our team, we're more than happy to talk to you about what that's going to take from a support standpoint. But if you need to call us, I'm sure a lot of the people on this call already call us on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You guys already know how to reach us. So, but just in case you lose the number, right, you can either Google it or find it here. So thanks again, everybody. I guess that's it for us today.
Yeah.
We'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.